Awesome, awesome. So we've got the right replay up. It's time for little bits of coaching. I've got a little bit of feedback coming through someone's mic. I'm not sure if they got speakers on or...
I think it was Ragnar.
Oh, no worries.
Oh, yes.
All right,
Oh, my,
let me just get me
my
hotkeys
God.
going. We should be all good. Awesome. Thank you very much for the support, Dude I Am Spatial and Imperion. Welcome to the Pigsty, guys. Thank you so much, or welcome back, I should say. Both long-term subs, 1 year and 20 months. Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it. All right, so this replay is all about how do I use tanks and libs better. Let's go through, take a look. I believe this was about 2900 MMR, which is gold 2, I want to say. I'm not actually sure of the exact boundaries right now. Somewhere in that general range. So we're going to just kind of zoom through and take a look straight at that. Looks like a 2-on-1 build order. Unfortunately, the Reaper did not get microed. I forgot to build my micro. I effed up. This will be interesting. So Mad Fireman, following the golden rule of prioritizing telling your opponent your mistakes rather than fixing them. Funnily enough, mistakes really don't matter that much. They're bad and they're something you should focus on outside of game. A little tip for the player who we're not coaching, the Zerg. It's 1,000 times better if you just roll with the punches than worry too much about it. Your ability to embrace and deal with mistakes as they come is one of the most powerful skills in StarCraft. Now, we do see from... Sorry, what was that?
I mean, by the way, apart from a few replays, many of those are from the recent patch. Apart from like 4 replays.
Oh my God.
The first 4.
Only the first 4 are from the old one, or the...
Yes. Yes. Only the first 4 are from the old one.
Oh, really? The rest are all from the current one. Awesome. That's great. Good to know. Awesome. So we can try after this replay to just do some of the other ones. I guess I'll just go through the first 4 and then we'll go through and grab the new ones. Thanks, Booyah.
I can replace the 4th one. The 4th one is actually me.
No, that's fine. We'll just go through. I've already downloaded them, so that should be fine. Cool. All right, thank you. It's me, your brother, with the 6-month resub. Love the casting code. Thank you so much. All right, so what was I talking about just then? Rolling with the punches. Oh yeah, the Overlord walked right through the base and is sitting in the base. So something we talk about with players is minimap awareness and getting used to keeping an eye on the minimap. But what I see up to right through Gold League is players just letting Overlords sit in vision of their minimap and never doing anything about it. And that tells us we're really not in the practice of looking at that minimap or using it that much. And this is something where I think I've never really talked that much about minimap usage. And at some point I probably need to do a video on it. But Day 9 used to have really great videos where he would, like, in his Newbie Tuesdays, be like, use the minimap, click there, click there, click there. Whenever you're doing something else, look at your minimap. Because letting an Overlord sit in your base to an advanced player, this is one of these things where you kind of go, oh, this should never be happening. We shouldn't be letting that go on. That's crazy. So the Overlord just kind of chilling there is a big problem in this game. Gives our opponents so much like information and freedom to know what's going on, and just getting rid of stuff like that can make such a big difference. So we're gonna have a nice little warning early on to not be dickheads to people who've submitted replays. That's right, Luke Bomber. I'm talking to you, buddy. Don't make fun of the players too much. A little light joke here or there is fine. Don't take it any further than that, all right, mate? We're all fuck up our builds. No one plays perfectly. We're gonna be nice to the players who are brave enough to submitting replays, okay? Alright, so we see a 2-on-1 drop comes through. Doesn't do too much damage. And we did sacrifice those Marines. Quick hot tip for anyone out there who's practicing a 2-on-1. If you're ever facing too many units to engage, it's almost always better to kind of back off and not fight. If you think there's too many units. And that's something you get better at judging with time. So you see enough roaches and queens to deal with it, just pick up and go home is a really good way to do it. Once you get to a bit faster at the game, maybe 130, 140 efficient APM, then you could go drop in the middle, and when you get a bit of spare APM, run in, scan, clear some creep, and then run away with it. But always really good to keep those Marines because they build up in power over time. Now we're about to get a big Marine tank army. We're going to head up into Liberators as well. So let's get to that big siege army, and let's see how it goes. So this question was all about the usage of that siege army, and we're going to take a look at the control groups, because if you're using more than one siege unit, it's really hard. But you often want to prioritize having one of those siege units on a control group, the most important one that you have the most of. So let's take a look at how this goes. I can hear a few noises there on Discord. What's happening, guys? Oh.
He just needed there was only one control group, and there was no scan ahead of the east of the third. I just think that if the road traveler coming and in such cases, many times it's better to mass put way higher marine loader count before doing the push.
Yeah, definitely needed a lot more awareness there of what was going on exactly and everything that was happening. So that was just being really blind on the map and kind of walking into a really bad position. And it's a really complicated army as well. So definitely feel like Delta here is overcomplicating things. You know, trying to go tanks and liberators, it's awesome if you get it all sieged up, but you're making composition that's too hard. So this is kind of the same problem players run into. Oh no, that siege tank's shooting the destructible plate and was killing its own marines. Oh, that's bad luck. This is the problem players run into. And let me know if the game sounds a little loud, guys, by the way, in chat. I think the level's okay. I might turn it down ever so slightly, actually, just a tiny bit more. It does feel a little bit loud in these battles. It's just like, how are we going to control this composition? And you can tell there isn't really a proper game plan on that from Delty other than manually doing it. So let's go back to just before we push out and have a think about this. I mean, realistically, we can say, cool, I can use tanks and liberators, but they kind of do the same thing. Liberators are a bit more hard to deal with because they need anti-air to shoot them, but they're 1,000 times easier for you to fuck up with if you've got 2 siege units. So rather than saying, how do I use tanks and liberators better? Let's embrace that we are shit at StarCraft. And this is not just if you're in Gold League. It's not if you're in Silver League or Bronze League. This is if you're in GM League. We're all shit at StarCraft, and we should all make our life a lot easier wherever possible. So, you guys have to make sure you simplify your composition. Now, a lot of Protoss players, there was a big downturn in Legacy of the Void where players were like, oh, I can't play Protoss. How am I going to use force fields and blink my stalkers and also fire my disruptor shots and land my Psystorms at the same time? It's too many spellcasters, it's bullshit, it's unfair. And my answer was always the same to these Protoss players, and it was, how about you just use one spell well, and the rest of your army can be A-move stuff like Immortals, Archons, Colossi. They'd be like, no, that doesn't work. I'm like, yes, it does. It's what most pro gamers do. And they're like, but this one time I saw Stats microing an Oracle, and he was also doing Storms and Force Fields all in tandem, and he had a Disruptor firing. And I'm like, yeah, that was like 1 out of 100 of Stats games, the best Protoss in the world. Most of his games, he's got a bunch of A-move shit and just Psystorm or just Force Field. We always want to keep our army nice and simple. And likewise, you want to apply that to every race. And when I see a Zerg player who is not a super high-level player trying to build Infestors and Vipers, I go, no, don't do it. That's so hard. Using 2 different spellcasters, that's crazy, man. Likewise here, tanks and liberators pretty much achieve the same goal. I would rather we just have a few more medevacs. If we want to build liberators who say, oh, I've got 3 or 4 medevacs, that's all I need, that's great. Use liberators for harassment. But you know what would be even better? Because like we're even building extra stubborns. Have a second factory. Build more siege tanks. If we want to add more siege power, that would be great. That would be fantastic. Not just that, we could have all the tanks on a single control group. And then we could say, okay, main army's on 1 or the whole army's on 1, but the tanks are also on 2. So if we ever get surprised by an enemy, we just go press 2, control group, press the siege hotkey, and then we can focus on microing our marines actively. And this just simplifies our army. Now, the other big thing that goes on here with how do you use siege units, how do I micro, it's not just about let's simplify the game plan. It's also something else very important. And that is, if your core of your army is marines, you want to give them health insurance. You want to give them Kevlar that covers their junk. These Marines here, are they go into battle and they get handed little plastic cups to cover their junk. And they're like, what? That's not going to stop a Zergling Claw or a Roach Shot. They're going to get my fucking junk burned off by acid. They're like, yeah, you don't even get shields. You get like a plastic box. They need combat shields! The most forgotten upgrade in all of StarCraft 2. And this is one of those things which I think all Terran players feel a lot of solidarity with their pro brethren, right? Because we see pro gamers forget combat shields a lot. We talk about it in casts. Everyone's so good now. They usually remember it after not too long, but it does occasionally decide games. And I feel like if you go back to Heart of the Swarm, it got forgotten even more. So combat shields is so important. The next thing is we are blind as fuck. Now, don't get me wrong. As a Terran, it's not as important as Zerg to have map vision. It is still one of the most fundamental skills you need to be working on as a player. Right now, we're just headbutting onto the map blind, and we're going to get massacred. We're not even watching. Let's go to the camera of Delta. Delta's like, cool, move across the map. No idea what's out there, but let's do it. Look back and the whole army's dead. So, the way Terran armies work is they're glass cannons. They're high-damage, long-range units that rely on being sieged up, set up, in tandem, covering each other in the terrain. And whenever you move out without looking, this is the equivalent. For anyone who's a fan of the Aliens movies, or the Alien series, this is basically treating your army like they're those terribly shitty mercenaries in the second movie in Aliens. Where, like, the moment the bad guys show up, they're just running around screaming, it's game over, man! Ah! And they're fucking just, like, losing their minds and shit. And it's like, wow, you guys are the worst troops ever. So, if you imagine they were actual awesome fucking crack troops, what would they do? They would have a dude on a hilltop with fucking binoculars. They'd be radioing around. They'd be hiding in the mountains and shit. The enemy comes into a fucking mountain pass, and then you fire your siege tank artillery. Your marines are on the high ground, spread out, and you fucking massacre them, right? You got to imagine you're the special forces. You're the badass modern military. But you are most certainly not a bunch of warrior Vikings who just march across the map and headbutt into the opponent and go, yeah, let's just fucking form a shield wall and fuck this shit up. It's not going to happen. The Zerg are those units. The Roach Hydra, that's a fucking just headbutt into the enemy composition right there. Meaty units that don't really need a lot of micro. They just kind of want to fight, and they're going to massacre this fight. So, how do you fix that? How do we avoid this scenario here, which is essentially you've been building up for the whole game as the Terran, and you just throw your whole army away in one go? First things first, and that is you as a player need to shift your focus. So when you get to this point as a player, hey, Carter. Thanks, 100-bit cheer. Much love, dude. I should turn my alert sounds down a little bit today, but we'll get on it. We'll get to it later. So, as you start to do this, you need more map vision. And the most basic way of doing this is just send a few marine spotters out. So what I would do, if this was my selection, and I get I'm not on the normal interface, I would basically say, I want a marine here, I want a marine here, I want a marine here. Just like send marines to basically all the areas, all the paths across the map outside my opponent's base. And I would already be planning where I'm going to push. I'd be saying, that's the third base. I want to push up here and siege on this high ground. I'm already planning this beautiful high ground terrain, spotting with the binoculars, setting up the artillery, whatever the fuck else we want to call it. I'm already planning that. So what are we going to do? I would grab my units. I would attack move here or just move command, deselect a marine, shift left click. Move there, shift left click a marine. Move there, shift left click a marine on one of these portraits. I would then go control group 1 to remake my control group. I would move it back to where it is, wait for those marines to spread out, and then move out a few seconds behind those marines so they're a bit ahead of my army, and they're providing me a little bit of warning and vision. Now, not just that, we're also going to try to make sure that we've spent the whole game building up to this push. We need to commit to it, right? So as a Terran, but really as any player, the moment you want to swap from, I've been macroing all game, I've been spending my money, I built my infrastructure, let's go push out. When you first push out, you do want to do a bit more macro. You want to make sure, okay, let's start my 2-2 would be perfect in this game, right? Oh, we're on 3 bases now. I should get more barracks. Why are we only on 4 barracks? You should always be on 5 barracks on 2 base. We're only on 4, and we're going for another starport. Way too fancy. Our army is fundamentally a Marine Marauder army. We should be building a bunch more barracks here. So, like I said, it should be 5 barracks on 2 base. If we're going to 3 base, we should be up to 7 or 8 barracks. We could easily add 3 or 4 more barracks right now, and that would be perfect. Start 2-2, do that. And then as our army gets onto the map, even this far out, or if we know that the enemy's over here, which our marine spotters would say, we're going to swap our entire focus onto controlling that army. So, let's look at this scenario and imagine it a bit differently. Marine spotters are heading out. Cool. Okay, it's time to move out. Oh, the marine that went to the south has just run into that Roach Hydra and died. Now we can do one of 2 things. We can say, I'm not afraid of that army at all. I'm going to just move to the north, try to bypass it, get to their base. Or I can just siege up where I am. Select number 2, siege up the tanks. And that Roach Hydra is going to move into our tanks. We'd stim our marines. And we would absolutely ravage this army. With 3 sieged up tanks, the marines stimmed before the fight happens. Not having shields is a bit of a concern, but it would be a completely different game from there. What's impressive here is the spending of Delty. Delty's got good spending on the money and way better macro than the Zerg. The Zerg is at 49 drones, which is, the technical term for this economy is shit. And this is most players up to a pretty high level, as they will have a pretty shit economy. There's not a lot of longevity with this Zerg economy. That being said, what is Mad Fireman, the Zerg player, doing well? Following my rule for players who are below Diamond League, or especially below Platinum League. If you're in Bronze, Silver, or Gold, the first stage of the game should be to build up about 50 workers. If you're really ambitious, maybe 60 or 65. But from there, most of your focus should be on micro and how you use the army that you've spent the whole game building up to, right? The problem Delty's having is Delty is followed the advice of Twitch chat, followed the advice of Reddit and all the StarCraft players out there too much. Delty has said, I want to get good at StarCraft. And what has every single person in the StarCraft community said? Just macro. You just got to get more money, build more workers, never stop building workers, and just keep spending your money. And the problem here is that's been fantastic, but if we can shift off that focus at some point and then use the army better, that's where we get profit. So I would be totally happy for Delty to be floating 3,000 minerals, 2,000 gas, not have a fourth on the way, have forgotten 2-2, yet have been using that army a lot better in the middle of the map. And that's a trade-off where I understand you're going to suck at, once you start focusing on your army, going back and spending your money. So there's this change up, and this is where mental flexibility starts to come in your improvement as a player, is not only am I going to focus on trying to make sure I spend my money and be really good at macro, but I'm also going to realize at some point, if I don't ever use my army correctly, that doesn't give me as big a return as I'd like. So we're going to have a two-part focus when we want to improve as a player, and even as a high-level player, this is something you should apply to some extent. So what is that two-part focus? It's part one, spend money, build lots of workers, build up real quick, get a nice economy, let's do that. Okay, that's part one. Part two is, as the game gets later, improve our army control. Get better and better at that army control. Over and over again, try to keep improving at that. See what we can do in that regard, and what can happen. So it looks like we are going to get probably overwhelmed here. We're still building very fancy liberators. If we had just 2 factory tank, it would be way easier to control this. And if we had combat shields and we're focusing on microing our marines and keeping up marine production instead, we've actually got plenty of minerals, but we're not queuing marines because we're too focused on this liberators. And liberators are pretty tough to use. We might do a bit of a demonstration on how to micro them later today, but let's just 8 times speed this and see if we find any other good examples of bad engagements, and we'll hop straight into the next replay. Just taking our time with the first few replays while we get warmed up. Thank you everyone who submitted a replay. Just remember, guys, this is the Newbie stream, so if you have any questions and you think they're really stupid, well, my stream is always an idiot welcoming place. You guys can ask the dumbest shit possible. Why? Because there's no such thing as a dumb question. There's just ignorant people who are too afraid to ask. Everyone starts out ignorant. Everyone starts out not knowing the answer to shit. The people who I've respected the most and tried to learn from the most are the people who just unashamedly seek knowledge. And if they don't know shit, they just ask it. All the best gamers I've found are the ones who, when they get into a game and they're enjoying it, they just keep asking questions. Wait, how does this work? Does this do this? Oh, you meant to do... And then they're constantly learning because they're seeking knowledge. But if you never seek knowledge and you never ask questions, your improvement's just gonna be really shit. So we see there another push, which is very desperate. We kind of just throw away a hodgepodge of units, walking onto creep, using them not together. And yeah, and we're trying to focus on going for things like advanced ballistics, where most games, and I think a really good exercise for players is they can be won on early game units, right? But especially like going past a mid-game composition of, say, Roach Hydra, Hydra Bane, Marine Tank, Charge Lot Archon Immortal. There's very rarely a reason to. A lot of us watch a lot of pro games, so when we start playing ladder, we say, oh, I need to go carriers now to counter this, or I need to go mass range liberator for the late game, or I need to go this or that. And 90% of the time, if we just focused on using the previous composition better, it would never have gotten to that point in the game. So yeah, it's getting to Broodlords now, but this is after like 3 or 4 gigantic failed engagements, right? We had many opportunities on just Marine Tank to close this game out before the Broodlords came out. Not to mention, Mass Marine can beat Broodlord as long as you have enough of it. They will gun through the Broodlings, get on top of those Broodlords real quick. Let's look, find this one big last engage. The Liberators hopefully stay in anti-air mode. And just kind of try to take out the broods, I think, would actually probably be the best way to do this. And hopefully the tanks on siege and the marines just stim through everything. Well, the tanks aren't part of it. The libs are going to stay in anti-air mode. Don't think there's enough marines. They do have combat shields, right? They don't have combat shields. No! I thought combat shields started at some point. Apparently not. No combat shields on those marines. That's rough. But you can see how if there's another 20 marines here, or if they had shields, they would annihilate those broodlords. So anyways, GG's. Keep the composition simple. Scout ahead of your army. and it should be good. GG's.